I have a nice car, and this guy said to me one day, he saw me pulling up in Tala shopping centre, and I get out of the car, and he's looking at me out of the corner of his eye. He was a bit pissed. It was about 11 in the morning. And he goes to me, "Where did you get a car like that?" And I said, "Oh, the government gave it to me. I'm just straight in from Africa. They're giving them to all the Africans." And he goes, "I knew it. I knew it." And I thought, for fuck's sake, they just winded him up. But what I'm saying is, there's all these misconceptions, but at the heart of it is, if you treat people unfairly in their own country, please don't be surprised when they get upset. Because that's a normal human reaction to being treated unfairly. And it isn't to the exclusion. I don't talk about excluding anybody, but I do talk about including people whose country traditionally this was and is. And I think that that's the biggest scandal of what's happening now. A white person says what I say, and oh my God, you're a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And I take great pleasure in understanding that my cultural heritage is what gives me a right to speak, and it gives me an identity, and I've never lost that. I'll always be an Irishman. Whatever people say about the colour of my skin, I shouldn't be. I'm less Irish than you probably, because you have, I assume, 2 white parents. That's okay. If I have to wait a bit longer than you to get seen by the doctor, I accept that, because I'm grateful for the fact that I'm in the running at all. But if I come from another country, as a decent person, I would say, no, sorry, look after this guy first. And when you've looked after him, I'm happy to wait my turn. And I think most decent people are, but the politicians, that doesn't fit with what they want. They want you to just stand in the corner and to be quiet.
When the Irish arrived during the famine times in New York and Boston and Baltimore and Philadelphia, after the mobs had thrown rocks at them and saying, "Go back home, Paddy," the next person they met was the Democratic representative who said, "Welcome to America. There's a soup and a sandwich over there for you. Here's your US citizen form, and here's your Democratic voter card." If you want to know what's happening, all the political parties here want a blank slate. They want a new constituency that doesn't have the baggage, that won't remember how the politicians basically threw us to the IMF in 2008 and suddenly resigned for family reasons. They want new people who don't remember when RTE, during the height of their psychological warfare against the Irish state, during the COVID lockdown, had parties where there was no mask and no social distances. And when they should have went to prison for that, and all they did was lessons were learned. There's a lot of people out there who now see, and it's rapidly increasing, and it's going on in all the countries. In England, the days of Tory and Labour is over. In Ireland, the days of Fianna Fáil, Fianna Gael is rapidly coming. Everyone is going, these are all working for the same side. Now, what's the best way to deal with that? Bring in new ones, have no baggage and have no skin in the game, as they say. Wait for the natives to die, and then you have your new population. So what's being done to the Irish right now with this globalist human trafficking and the flooding of our country with people who don't come from here? And remember, it's always the politicians, not the people. Never blame the people. If I was in a crappy country and I was offered to live in a nice, rich country like this, I'd take it too. What's being done to us is being exactly what was done to the Native Americans and exactly what was done to the Aborigines in Australia. We are being disenfranchised by our so-called government. The present Irish government want to exterminate the Irish. There's no difference between Manifest Destiny and what they call the New Ireland. We are an Indigenous people, and our kin is not the colonial British, the colonial Belgians, the colonial Germans, the colonial French. Our kin are the Native American First Nations peoples, the Aborigines of Australia, and any other Indigenous people that has been wiped out or marginalised, basically discarded from society. We're hearing language like this already. White Irish men have all this privilege. Sorry, that's racist. You're the white Irish man that has the privilege, not the average guy who's trying to make a living and look after his family and has to live and die by the rules that you impose upon him. We were victims of colonialism. We were the first ones transported to the Americas as indentured servants, which is a nice way of saying slaves. You're the one that has the privilege.
Ireland's a small country. We need immigration, of course we do. But when you flip the switch that certain people can enter Ireland without papers, without identification, you're putting everybody at risk. If you mention the subject, you're against refugees, which is bullshit. My father was an immigrant, but the government play loose and fast with words, and they want to paint everybody into you're against immigration. And that's not the case, and it's a lie. And I think that trick of the switch, whereas if you have any criticism of the government's policy, then you're right-wing, you're racist, you're against refugees, and it's a very dangerous game they're playing. It always gets me this, and it makes me slightly emotional because, Ireland have been fought from outsiders for so long. You know, they dealt with the English, they dealt with the abuse in the church. And now I see scenes of the Irish Guards being used to silence and quell Irish people who have genuinely legitimate concerns about their safety, about their communities, about their daughters, about their mothers, and yet they're being tarred with a brush that is not fair, you know, and it makes me angry because these people have lived in this country for generations and generations, and their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, they had nothing. I saw it. And they worked themselves into the fucking grave, believing that they were leaving something of value for their children, for their grandchildren, and that is the Irish inheritance. And to point that out has become almost radical, and it shouldn't be. It's common sense. You know, these people who were left a beautiful country, a safe country, now feel that that's in danger because of government policy, or should I say because of EU policy, because at this stage, Irish government are not running this country. Was anybody told at the last supposed election that this vote would mean that you would have to stand by and watch Ireland being changed forever? And that's what makes me angry and what makes me upset, is to see decent, kind, gentle people being taken advantage of. And this is something the Irish have had for millennia. They're good people at heart. Of course we got our own fair share of gobshites and Egypts. That much we all know. But at the heart of it, there's a psychological game that the church played on the Irish people. And it's when they realize that they're compassionate, they're susceptible to guilt, they care about people, and they can be made to care about things which have nothing to do with them. You know, as a child, we used to send money to the black babies in Africa. You know, that was where this, you have to be caring, because if you don't care, you're not a good person. So we were brought up in a culture of being nice. And as I said before, you know, being nice is what's got us into this shit. You know, people wanting to do the right thing, being sort of mentally persuaded to be kind, to be generous, to the point that their own safety, their own culture, their own heritage, and their own inheritance is now in danger and at question.
The way they package it, you see, it's very interesting, the globalists or the World Economic Forum crew. So it's always packaged in inclusivity and, you know, the global world, which is fine. You see, a lot of it's a lot of good stuff in there. Yeah, there's a lot that are the good part of ourselves agree with. Yeah, I mean, you know, we are one big global family and let's look after each other. So it's appealing to our better nature. They're very clever in all this, but then they manipulate it, which is what's happening with this open door policy, you know. Oh, Ireland, the land of 1,000 welcomes, you know, and 1,000,000 goodbyes to our own. And isn't this half the problem? It's not that we've anything against people coming into our country or breaking bread with people. Yes, we have travelled the world. Yes, we love other cultures and we love living in different countries ourselves. But come on, you know, we have to manage. There has to be some kind of border control and management of the amount of people that can come in. And the way it is now, it's just bananas. You know, we have this crazy government. It's like open door, uncapped numbers, keep them coming, keep it coming, keep them coming. And coming in with no documents sometimes. Again, the newspapers are so complicit. When they are reporting crime from some of the newcomers, they'll just say, you know, a man from Meath. And you're like, wait, is he actually from Meath? And then they're like, that's racist. That's racist that you have to ask that. It's like, that's not racist. Now stop it. So, you know, we have to come back to common sense. We have to come back to having some kind of border control, protecting our own, making sure our own come first. It's so bananas when you listen to the news and it's like, we're building all these homes, you know, for all the newcomers. And then the next report will be there's 13,000 homeless Irish people. There's nothing we can do about it. We're supposed to be sitting there and going, oh yeah, but you know, it's the right thing to do. No, it's not. You know, we have to have some common sense. And I think that'll be part of other people's awakening. Because sometimes you're like, did you see that? Do you think that's a bit funny? Do you think something a bit peculiar going on here right now? I think if we can stay measured and peaceful and loving, this open door policy is ridiculous. But let's take aim at who's doing it. Like, of course these people are going to come in if they're offered all the goodies. You can't blame them. I do not blame them. I blame the government. So that's where my eye is. But I just think we have to be strategic. We have to be calm. We have to be measured. Use our voices. Be yourself. Take responsibility for yourself.
I don't know what the agenda is with bussing in all of these young men. You have to accept that we don't know what's going on. Be a lawyer about it. Lawyer will always say, unless you have full possession of the facts, don't jump to conclusions. Who are these people who are coming in? Why are they being brought in? Where are they being brought? What's going on? We don't know. They're entitled to say what they're saying in their own terms. We want to know what's going on. You're not telling us what's going on. When you look at the way the state works now, they've just stopped telling people what the story is. And you write to them and say, I want to get a disclosure in X, Y, Z, and they just ignore you.
You know, it's easy to make people scared. It's why so much of the news is negative and bad, because we have this built-in fear of bad things happening to us. And when we see them happening to other people, it gives us a false sense of security for, well, at least it's not me. But there are things happening in the world right now that have absolutely fuck all to do with the people of Ireland, and they're being made to feel like it's their responsibility and that they should fix it and that they should stand up and give what they have. And I think that that's shifting. When Micheál Martin said,
let there be no doubt about where Ireland stands. We want nothing to do with a backward-looking idea of sovereignty. We remain absolutely committed to the ideals of the European Union.
excuse me? You might think that. You don't speak for the people of Ireland. You certainly don't speak for people who want an identity, who want their country to be safe and secure. And this notion that we're no longer Irish, we're Europeans. Hello, who decided that? The identity of Ireland is now on a precipice because, you know, there are people who see the Irish flag as like, oh, they've got an Irish flag, they must be right-wing, they must be racist. And people use this ridiculous excuse of, yeah, but the Irish, they went out to America. Yes, they did. Many of them died on the boat. They didn't have any money. They didn't get any social security. They didn't get an apartment. They didn't get a medical card. And if they didn't work, they starved and they died. And they worked themselves to the bone and they sent money home every month. I remember the letters from America. Women waiting for the postman in the hope there'd be a few bob. That's the difference. So anyone who gives you that bullshit now and says, oh, but the Irish emigrated. Yeah, they did. And they looked after themselves and they looked after their own people, and if they didn't, they starved. That's not what's happening here, and that argument is bogus. The Irish identity, it's kind of been stolen and been painted with dirty words, like being proud to be Irish somehow makes you against something. You know, being proud of your culture and your country means you want to exclude someone, and that's the game they play. We hear constantly about international obligations, and we hear about duty of care. And those words, when you apply them to the Irish, is, well, okay, you have a duty of care to the Irish, do you not? First and foremost, not to the exclusion of others, but to not have that duty of care to them makes them feel excluded and unloved. And that's what we're seeing here, is a nation of people who feel unloved. They feel unloved by the media, they feel unloved by the government because they are unloved.
That's one of the things in the discourse that has appeared in recent years, that it seems every nation on earth has the right to exist, except the Irish. Like, how is that not racist? You know, we have to invite the world here and celebrate them and allow them to extinguish our culture, or actually stand down our culture because they are here, because we don't want to offend them. Well, no, these things need to be addressed and we need to discuss them. And that's kind of, I think, the mission we have now as we go forward, to maintain our discussion in as much in public as we can about these important things.
Ireland's history has never been about not being accepted. You know, we were rejected as Irish people back in the day in England, and even in America we were ridiculed, we were categorized. So the Irish know what it's like to be the odd man out. They know what it's like to be rejected. And to the people that I say refugees welcome, Ireland has never been unwelcoming to refugees. Never. So this notion that there has to be one person saying welcome, one person saying go away, it's polar opposites. And that's not what's happening. What's happening is the media and the government are presenting it like it's simply black and white, and it's not. Of course you help people. We have a history of it. Look at Live Aid. We give something like 3 times more money than anybody else. Look at the size of fucking Ireland. And yet we stood up and we were generous. But whether you're sending money to the black babies in Africa 50 years ago, whether Bob Geldof's roaring at people to send money to Africa now, at the heart of that is the belief that this is your responsibility. More so then it's your responsibility to look after your own people. So to the people who have those signs that say refugees welcome, everybody's entitled to their point of view. But I would say this to them: if you feed somebody else's children before you feed your own, something's gone wrong. And to say that is not against anybody, it's actually for the Irish. And when I look up the road at the Dáil there and I see the Irish flag hanging outside, it makes me sad, because I think, why don't you just tell the truth, guys? Put up the European flag and stop pretending that Ireland means anything to you, because it doesn't mean anything to them. We've been sold down the river to some economic dream which has got no elected officials. It has these unelected officials in Brussels dictating to governments what to do, how many refugees to take, how much we'll fine you if you don't take them. So it's like simply this: if you don't own the keys to your front door, your house is not yours and it's not secure. And you wouldn't bring somebody into your house that you didn't know who they were. I grew up in Killybegs. You went to bed at night and you left the key in the front door, or you left the latch open on the back door because you were in a community. There were fellow Irish people who might have a problem in the night. You felt secure and safe to do that. You wouldn't do it now. And when I grew up, when you sent your children to school, there was one thing that was absolutely certain, and it was this. You knew that when you put little Mary or Ashleen or whoever you sent into school, she was coming home at 3 o'clock safe and sound. You can't say that anymore. And I would put those things down to the government's policy of basically outsourcing immigration to an unelected group in Brussels. And that, for me, is a real danger for the future of the country and for the safety, and not just for the Irish. As I said, for the people who've come here from other countries, they want to feel safe and secure, and they know, and I get messages from them all the time, even Ukrainians saying, well, we didn't know you didn't have houses. We thought there wasn't a housing problem here. I mean, we're grateful for what we've got, but we had no idea that your own government hadn't sorted out your problem. When the government decided that they had a moral duty or an international obligation to house 100,000 people from another country, logic for me would have said, maybe we should stick these 14,000 Irish people into houses, and then at least, you know, if from a PR point of view, it will look better. But they didn't, they went feck 'em. And that was like, whoa, so you could have sorted out the housing problem at any stage in the last 30 years. And these people still have a nerve to stand up and say, we care, we're going to fix this. Sorry, you're discredited. You had your opportunity, and we've all the homeless charities taking up the slack for the government, but really not fixing the problem. But the government could have fixed it, and they could fix it tomorrow. But their obligations are for the Brussels bankers. They're not for Irish people. Have you noticed how little they talk about the Irish, these people across the way? They don't do it anymore. It's like a dirty word. You know, the tricolour is now becoming a symbol of hate. Bullshit. It's the flag of Ireland. But that's what they want you to forget, because we're in this great European experiment. We're under the thumb of Germany and Brussels. If you have a duty of care to anybody, how is it not to the people who supposedly elected you, who pay your wages? It's not fashionable to say that anymore, and that's scary.
They're now changing neighbourhoods deliberately, and they're using immigrants as pawns, and they don't care what happens, because A, they're following the orders given to them by their leaders, and B, they're not sentient enough. They don't have the internal monologue to actually say, am I actually damaging this country here? Am I damaging my nation? Am I damaging these people in this neighbourhood? No, the first thing they'll do is they'll be told to call someone a name, to throw a slur at someone that's been thrown in other countries and other situations like that. The working class always pays the initial brunt of the attack, whether it's steel mills or coal mines shut down, whether it's their neighbourhoods being flooded with refugee centres. Whatever is done to the working class, you can be sure that's the agenda, because they hit them first.
And now we have a situation where we're being told that people who are not from Ireland can vote in the elections. I'd like to try you getting registering to vote in Uganda and see how far you go. And also, if you go to Uganda, you can be in Uganda 50 years, you're never going to be African. I'm sorry to tell you, you can paint your face black and put cornrows in your hair, but you're never going to be African. And yet what we have now is this notion that citizenship makes you culturally something that you're not biologically born to be. Where does it end when you say that the people of this country are no longer a priority for housing, for hospital services, for mental health services? And what you do by creating that situation is you put a big divide between the Irish people and the new arrivals. Irish people are human beings, and they know that when they're treated unfairly, because we've had a history of it, it's not the first time somebody's come in and going, I'm going to tell you what's happening here. And then that unfairness, it starts to rumbles down the pub and like, you're getting a fucking free postage, you know, Jesus. You know, and you're talking about people whose generations of their family had nothing. I mean, I remember in Donegal years ago, you go into a small cottage, there'd be 6, 7, 8 kids. Everything happened in this room. The kids are in a metal bath in the corner. Daddy's over there with his fiddle and whiskey or whatever. Mum's cooking and baking. But what you saw was people who had very, very little. They went to the bog, they cut turf, they traded it with their neighbours, they grew potatoes. They were fairly self-sufficient, but they didn't have much. And if they were lucky, they had a bit of bacon to go with cabbage and spuds. And that's not too flippant to say, because that was pretty much the diet. There was no Ferrero Rocher, there was no, ice cream parlours. There wasn't fancy, it was basic. But they lived on that. They sucked it up. They raised their kids in the best way they could, believing that there was something of value in the sacrifices that they made for their children and grandchildren. And by the way, I'd like to go on record to say that Ireland has never been a racist country. In fact, almost the opposite. They'd be like, oh, geez, the black flick. I mean, they love difference. It's when it becomes overwhelming. I'm eternally grateful to Ireland for everything it's done for me, and how I've been treated, and how I've been given chances, and how I've been embraced.
We don't have a racism problem in Ireland, we never had. We have a racism industry in this country. We have these NGOs who are created for this express purpose of creating division. Their whole existence is based on the premise that there is a racism problem. This is a business model for these people, so in order to justify their existence, they're going to have to grow. And the more people are dependent on employment from these people to put food on their own table, they're going to look for it as well, which creates more and more division, creates a justification for hate crime legislation, hate speech, thought crime, which in turn causes the artists to shrink a little bit more and be a little bit more afraid to say the controversial things that need to be said. And it's not just happening in this country, it's happening to the people who are coming here from other countries. They're losing their identity because there's no young men left behind in their countries, so the big corporations can come in and plunder their resources as well, because they're all hanging on street corners in Europe, getting free stuff. They're going to take it. They have to understand, them people are being used as an alibi. They're being used as a weapon for the scum that are behind this. Replacement migration is on UN white paper documents, and then they look you in the eyes and tell you it's conspiracy theory. It's the gaslighting is incredible. They'll accuse you of everything they're doing. They're the racists, really. They're creating the racial divisions. I never had a problem with anybody of any race, colour or creed. Some of my good friends would be from mixed race backgrounds, but to be as Dublin as me, you can't compare that to what's happening now. To say there's no differences, it's dishonest to a degree that's it's just scandalous. And to use the faux compassion as a weapon against the Indigenous population, it's despicable, really. To replace a whole demographic, the communist concept of year zero, where you're starting from scratch. As Orwell said in 1984, if you control the past, you control the present. So that's what they're trying to attempt. They want to, once we're gone, they want a blank slate, and the kids won't have any national pride, any memory of who we were. This is all a long, long time in the plan, and they've weakened people spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, creatively. It's as evil as any war. To think you can just come in and you can supplant the whole culture to create your new vision for the world, to make it a situation where countries are no longer countries, they're just plots of land, where corporations go and do their bidding. There's going to be a situation in the future probably where you're not going to have police forces as such, you'll have corporate security who are protecting these mega corporations, and they will be the new nation states. There'll be no countries per se, the countries will be just plots of land, and everyone will be from everywhere and nobody will be from anywhere. And that's the sad reality of where we are heading if we don't wake up very soon.
And you see how the NGO thing was so central to the issues concerning immigration. They instantaneously flooded the place with NGOs, pop-up NGOs overnight. All the old cliches, bringing the community together. People saw right through it. They knew, right, who are these people coming in and telling us that we're suddenly all wonderful and we all have to be friends. The media will interview them. They won't interview the locals. And so you'll have some local guy claiming to be a community representative. He's on a paycheck for being in an NGO, and he's saying, well, what we need really in Ballymun is to fight these far-right fascists is new bus services. No, that's not addressing the problem.
I do think that the solution is very simple, and it's this. The politicians grow a pair of balls and they go to Europe and they say, we're opting out of the immigration policy. We want to decide who comes to Ireland, how many, when, and who they are. You do it if it was your own house. And I think that's a simple truth. Those very words put the fear of God in them, because they're not taking their instructions from Irish people. They're not listening to Irish people. And if they did, they'd know that most Irish people are concerned now about the issue of immigration. And they can polarize it all they want and say it's far right, it's racist, it doesn't matter, it's not the point. The majority of Irish people are concerned about the government's policy regarding immigration. On this issue, I'm sorry, for the future of the country, for people's concerns, for our own safety, we need to address this as adults and say, no, you don't get to decide who comes to my house. You don't tell me who I have to let into my house. I'll make that decision myself.
Yeah, I think extremism of any kind needs to be called what it is. Because extremism means insisting on a particular set of beliefs and insisting on my way is the right way. And to insist on anything in this fabulous, mixed up, wonderful world of randomness and plan and diversity, to insist on any one way is a great arrogance. If you insist that immigration is wrong, you're an extreme fascist. If you insist that it's right, are you an extreme integrationist? You know, it's still insisting both ways. There's no compromise, there's no balance. The lesson of life is balance, where we see that there's no one way, that the diversity of life is such that in some situations one rule works and in another situation it doesn't work. In some towns it works beautifully, in another town it's a blessed catastrophe, you know, and that is true. And I can't say it's a blessed catastrophe, but I can say it's a wonderful thing. I can say it's a brilliant thing, but I can't say it's an awful thing. We have to watch out for these contradictions, because they show the lies, they show the fallacy. We have a responsibility to hold this state to account, because they're there to serve us and they're clearly not doing that. Now, it's the role of the media usually, because they are the public voice of the people. Your job is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, to be the voice of the man that has no voice. I believed that vocation, because it is a vocation if you're a real one. But that's not what it's become. I'm disgusted. It's become the total opposite, like comforting the comfortable, ensuring that the comfortable stay comfortable, and afflicting the afflicted. It's become the opposite. So the vocation has been distorted completely, and it's not worth the name journalism anymore. And so because the media don't do that job, then the citizens kind of can't sit back. Now the citizens have to be more active.